Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Transforming Scientific Research into Manager-Friendly Articles webinar, sponsored by the Human Resources Division in the Academy of Management. My name is Lisa Castro Christiansen. I am representing Henley Business School in AOM. Our objective, in line with the HR Division's mission to bridge research and practice, this webinar has been designed for Europe-based members of the HR Division and anyone interested in making evidence-based research more accessible and relevant to managers and executives. The Practice Committee of the HR Division is one of the newest committees which really tries to answer to the call for helping academics make their research more relevant, not only in academia, but also to the practitioners who may benefit from it. So this webinar is going to include tips and tricks, professional standards that HR practitioner journals require from contributing authors, HR practitioner journals experience with academic authors and vice versa, tips and tricks to reach a high academic acceptance level, how to approach HR practitioner journals, and strategies on how academics can have a stronger collaboration with practitioner journals. And to make this live for us, we have invited our esteemed presenter, Kim Stack-Nielsen of the Danish HR, which has been operating for the past 30 years. He is CEO. Professor Wolfgang Mehrhofer from WU Vienna University in Austria, and Professor Bård Kuvas from BI Norwegian Business School in Norway. And this is also the structure that we're going to follow. Kim will speak first from the practitioner's point of view. Wolfgang will follow after. He has engaged with a lot of, practitioner journals. And Bård has been engaging with leading newspapers, the media, radio, and television. So he's going to speak about his experiences in contributing to the wider society.
I've been in this business for quite a long time. In 1992, I started up the Danish organization, and today we represent about 40% of all Danish companies who has an HR department. And over the years, we of course had been doing quite a lot of things that we intended to bring to our readers. And we have also a network group, and we have a very large exhibition about human resources in Copenhagen once time each year with about 3,000 persons that's coming up. Now, my first clue to you will be that is to look at the DNA of the professional magazine. And what do I actually mean by that? Well, that is that the DNA of the magazine and the DNA of the readers is very important for you trying to find. Now, if you look at me as a sort of reader of a magazine, I would be in this area a sort of professional, but quite a lot of people would be what we called semi-professional or amateurs, which means that you have to understand it's very important for the readers to be interesting and find the value in the things that you're bringing into the articles. I know that you can be having years about a sort of survey, and before you're coming up with the possibility of writing articles as well. But there are, in the end, a sort of time where you actually can get the focus from the readers of your articles, and that's what I would try to explain. You can, in some funny ways, say that there's two ways to writing an article. That's the Lieutenant Columbo way or the Detective Hercule Poirot way. And what do I actually mean by that? Well, it's quite simple. If you see a movie with Columbo, you, as a viewer, you will know from the start who actually has done the bad thing or killed the person. And Columbo spent the next 50 minutes trying to get in the same position where you are. And what is the good thing about using it the Columbo way is that you actually give the facts, the key points of your article to the readers in the start. The other way is what Hercule Poirot normally do, is that he tries to find the best way to find who actually did the killing. And as he normally says that you have to use the small gray cells, he actually means that it also inspires you to think about what you're reading and trying to come up with some part-time conclusions about what this story actually will bring to you in the end. So it's all about how much time does actually readers spend on reading articles in the different kind of magazines that you are delivering articles or other kind of interesting things from your surveys. But one of the things that I also have to look at in our magazine is, one thing is the readers from the HR departments. The other thing is what they actually have as focus in their organization. Because HR is not just there for HR. HR there because of the strategy of the organization, particularly when we are talking about private organizations. And looking at this from a survey in 2024 from Gartner, they say that what the focus should be in 2025 was that the top CEO actually has a focus. More than 60% of them says growth. That means that when I'm reading an article about human resources or surveys or scientist articles, I also try to put it in the perspective of what people in our organization actually is looking for as well. Now, I know there has been the focus on growth, I would say, since the time of the COVID, but the things that even HR people have to understand, that if you ask the board, seems to be that their focus was on growth, technology, and then first workforce. That means HR are not on the top list, which also means that I really have to find something that can underline the strategy concerning workforce. But I also have to accept that I would not be the one that I actually says that this is priority number one. I will be number three. And so we have to understand what we actually is working with. Now, one thing is, of course, the company and what the board or the CEOs looking at. The other thing is that in an organization, our articles is also looking at what does the employees in the companies actually looking for to stay as longer as possible in the job. So there are, you could say, two objects. There's one, what the strategy is asking for, and the other one is that we also have to, in human resources, look for what can we gain to have the employees to staying longer in the job. And if you look at this survey as well, the same survey from Gartner, it says employee expectation, 62% of the candidates says they only apply for job that meet the majority of the EVP, employee value proposition requirements. So that you have to work with two sides also about your articles, because if you only benefit one of the side, you have to use the Lieutenant Columbo way of writing, because it's very important for the reader to understand that this article is more to underline your strategy, and is to underline how you can develop your employees. Now, looking at our magazines, we normally every 4 years do a survey. This is a survey from 1922, where we had 3 magazines at that time. And the interesting about these 3 magazines is the one who's in the red circle. It is the green and the blue one. And if you look at the middle one, which is the HR Manager, the magazine was called, more than 60% included the most satisfied, and the satisfied who was in the survey, they said, we are very pleased with your magazine. And for us, it's very important to have this, because we look also about the articles that would be brought to the people. So if they said no, they're not very kind of interested for human resources, then we of course have to change. And we do make changes, and I'll just come back to that. But this survey also was looking at how long time do people actually spend reading our magazine. Now, the person who was the chief of the HR department normally didn't read this HR Manager at the office. The person took it with her or him at home and spent about 50 minutes to read this magazine. And that's a very, very tall amount of minutes that they normally spend on this one. Now, if we then ask, does anybody else in your office read the magazine? And they said yes, between 4 and 5 other people also read the magazine. Other people from the HR department or other middle managers as well also read, but they spend only between 20 and 30 minutes to read. So it is important also the way that you write, that you have different kind of readers of these articles. But the good thing is that try to create what you would find the most interesting for the readers of your articles. And why I'm saying this is that readers, in particular concerning human resources, they are just like everybody else. One thing is a very well documented article. Another one is that if you can make me interesting from the start, not only by the articles that will be in front of me, but also by pictures. I know we normally say one picture says more than 1,000 words. And what is very important is that if you look at these two, the HR and Ledelse, which means HR and management, is our new magazine that we have been changing here in 2025. And the new one that we made is the HR International, which is only in English. Now, why do we now suddenly have 2 kinds of magazine? One is in Danish and is printed. The HR International is digital and in English. Well, it is because that our readers, as well as the Danish HR department, no longer only have focus on Denmark or Scandinavian, but have to be more international. That could be looking at EU, that could even be local at the global things that are turning on in human resources. The particular reason is that in Denmark, we actually need staff. And so if we look at the 300,000 who came into the labor market in Denmark over the last 3 to 4 years, 200,000 of these are coming from abroad, which means they were not born, they were not living in Denmark, but we invited them into Denmark to work here. We are actually doing so well that if you're looking at how Denmark is run for the moment, we can be quite pleased that we looking at the figures, we are one of the best in EU to doing production. Now, figures in one thing, pictures is another thing. And what we normally would like to do is that when we make articles, we try to find pictures that would actually encourage the readers to continue to read the article. And you can say that what everybody does. If you read a magazine or a newspaper, that exactly the same. And so it is, yes. But the thing is that we normally ask our writers is that, please, if you have some very good pictures that actually shows your personality, which invite the readers to say, wow, I think that what the person here, just looking at the person, would actually tell me that I have to read or would like to read more about this article. Even I can be looking a little bit more interesting as well. I normally write every year about the HR perspective for the coming year. I normally study about 10, 15 kind of surveys around from the world. And then I put it into one article, and we release it in our magazine as well as digital. And what I'm definitely trying to see is to what should the HR be looking at that their challenges will be in 2025. It also brings me further until that when we have the international HR, that we are going abroad to ask professors, scientists in human resources. Peter Capelli, maybe some of you know him. He was quite well known. I think it was in 2015. He had an article on the front of Harvard Business Review where he wrote, "Why does everybody love to hate HR?" And that's some of the things that actually was triggering people to say, wow, this article I need to read in the magazine, as well as this one from an old guy from Nick Holey from Henley as well earlier. This article, the good, the bad, and the absolutely game-changing. Everybody knows that it's half the title of the film with Clint Eastwood, but he had challenged you to try to look into the future in the way that we would be, that there'll be some good things, bad things, as well as something that would absolutely change the way that HR will be working in 2025-26. The other thing by using pictures is also that here is this woman is the chief of an HR department, but she also sent us a picture who actually is showing children, which means that if you in some way can underline the target in your article, that could be with pictures, that could as well be with other drawings that could actually tell what the message is. And you can, for example, use Pixabay, where it is possible to free download the drawings or pictures. Now, coming to the perspective of the guidelines, I would particularly says, if you go to the area where it says it is important to mention that our additional article contain 100% professional contents that is intended to inspire our readers and members. That is the main purpose. Now, we normally ask for an article with about 6,000 to 7,000 characters included or without spaces. But the most important thing is it's actually the message in your articles. And for particular business cases, which often is written by companies, we also declare to them that it is therefore not possible to advertise or highlight your company, but with you as the center of the professional article, you are showing the target group your knowledge and your skills without the content becoming commercial. So that is the main in our article. And the good thing is that we in Denmark have a connection with about 250 scientists from Danish universities, from others abroad, and we often use them in our magazine as well, in our digital magazine. And concerning scientists, they always know how to write and to know how to put it in a content that actually bring the people to understand the value. So it is very small guidelines, and the main purpose of our guidelines is to respect the readers and to respect that they would like to have some value of doing readers, but also to understand that they are on a semi-professional level. And you maybe sometimes had to write for, let's say, the semi-professional readers instead of for really other scientists. Now, in the end, I would like to show you something that is, for me, very common when we look at these things, is that articles is often described because of your surveys, your way that your scientist thinks has been brought into your surveys. But look at this picture. This is a new Jaguar, which you can't buy yet. But I expect that if the car would be interesting for me in 2026, that it contains all the knowledge that they have in the Jaguar Land Rover Group over the last 100 years, that they put the newest knowledge into this car. And that is also what people that's reading our article would like to know, is how can I use and how will it be when it's possible for me to understand and see this car one-to-one in 2026. Dear listeners, you're more than welcome to contact me on my email, ksn@danish.dk. Also, if you have articles that you think that could be interesting for human resources as well, don't hesitate to contact me.
On to you, Wolfgang.
Yeah, thank you very much. Come from the other perspective than Kim, obviously, from the academic perspective. What I'd like to throw out are a few experiences I've made over the years when writing for practitioner audiences, and I'll kind of focus on 4 areas that have turned out not so much deliberately, but more emergent as areas of experience and the ways of transferring insight, scientific insight that we generated to the practitioner world. On the one hand, through journal articles in journals that are targeting practitioners, then articles for newspapers and magazines, so kind of the broader public of a society, then by books, and not least articles that are written by others, but that are based on interviews, oneself being interviewed, either solely interviewed or with others. And these are the 4 areas I'd like to address in my kind of brief remarks, 15 minutes. To the journals, and I brought with me for each of these areas some examples out of my own life. They're in a way, they're a little bit dangerous because they can look, at least some of them, very similar to our usual academic journals, but are still very different. If you look at the organizational dynamics, for instance, who are kind of oriented more towards practitioner, if you look at Harvard Business Review, these are journals that kind of build on what we are doing, but give it a certain twist. And the entry tickets for these journals, as well as for more practitioner-oriented journals at the local level, these are the examples that you can see also in the image. Your academic pedigree and the somewhat heavyweight scientific publications are the entry tickets. So it doesn't make any sense to come as without a very solid knowledge and publication track record. And then sometimes people either from practitioner outlets approach you, or if you approach them, well, they react accordingly. And in addition, I think they must touch a practical nerve. Kim has outlined that it's not your hobby horse that you are riding that is of interest to the whole world. It's rather the other way around. There are kind of hot topics, topics that are of interest to the broader world. And if you are able to contribute to that, then that's fine. I think the Harvard Business Review piece that we did together with Gloria Kutscher 1 or 2 years ago was actually something like that. We have written about setbacks and their kind of counterintuitive effects, and that clearly raised some interest there. Also, if you write with journals, and you could have already, I think, guessed that from what Kim said, is there will be a lively interaction with the editor usually in terms of more the kind of way you present your argument. I know the German language editor that we are very often but regularly writing for kind of is not shy to kind of point out areas that do not meet the expectations of the practitioner world. And that's a very different interaction from the interaction with reviewers as we kind of are used to. Simplify your writing, that's, I think, that probably is a constant. Will be interesting to see what Bart says about that, but Kim has approached it, and I'll explain a little bit more later on about that. That's good. And be very relaxed about references, because you usually get only a very limited set of references. So that's one way, and then one important way. Another way and another area that has turned out to be quite interesting, and which brings a lot of visibility with it. A lot of visibility is writing for newspapers and magazines. Again, there is pretty sure what I call an editorial gatekeeper. So especially the newspapers and the magazines, they have sometimes specialized, sometimes it's the chief editor who is responsible for the whole thing. And they're on the lookout for something that they can publish. But given the kind of reach they have, either locally, regionally, or globally, they are very, very kind of aware of the importance of only publishing pieces that are well funded and that are well written. Either sometimes we, for instance, or I had a kind of a regular column or even a series about of these articles about certain topics, broader topics, or it's a one-off contribution. The regular column series obviously has to have a very close link to your expertise. If it's a one-off contribution and it's interesting, you're thinking about that, then nearly it's true that anything goes. What has helped me a lot is when I'm writing for practitioner audiences is that I don't kind of visualize in my inner kind of or in my mind the sophisticated academic colleagues like Lisa or Bart, but I kind of envision my kind of most simple-minded friend, and I'm saying, okay, to you, my dear friend, is who I'm writing to. So you have to understand, we completely, or at least we, but I completely underestimate what I take for granted. That's clear. We can talk about it. No, it's not clear. In your area, in your area of expertise, maybe it's clear, but you are writing to the broader public, to the broader community of your society. So don't overestimate kind of what you can take for granted, and that helps me when I write in this area. I won't cite now the partially well-known figures about how many people read an academic article once it's published, because that usually gets us depressed. But you can be sure that when you write for instance, a regional or national newspaper or magazine, quite a lot of people read that. So your writing is read by everybody, and, which is an important end, it's read by friend and foe alike, meaning people pick up on what you write, and depending on what you write, to which areas you have an opinion, a technical expertise, it sticks to the mind. What you write will be tied to your name forever. I mean, that's also true in academia, but especially in terms of newspapers and magazines. If you're in a later stage of your career, decide to run for chancellor or president or an important public position, journalists will dig into what you have written in the past. And that's something that we usually don't so much kind of think about when we write in academic articles, but for practitioner articles or for the broader public, that's for sure. One thing that recently was I was made aware of, which I think is also just a kind of small tip, is usually if you write for magazines, newspapers, they nowadays have it's also published in an online version, and then in this online version there is usually a comments section where the readers can comment on what you have written. If you are in your life in a kind of phase or stage where you kind of have a little bit doubt about yourselves, or if it's a more darker period of yourself, then don't look into the comment section in online articles, because what you might read there, it takes a strong stomach, as we say in German. If you are kind of very optimistic, good face, then yeah, go on. I tend not to look at the comment section because usually it makes me depressed. But there are also some nice kind of remarks there. In newspapers and magazines, what's very often the case, if you've written once or twice good things, things that had some resonance, people will come back to you. So it's a kind of self-reinforcing mechanism. So when you're doing it for the first time, then give it all you have if you want to continue, because that's the good thing. Journalists, newspaper editors, magazine editors are always on the lookout for sensible voices that they can contact and that they will be able to use in the future. The third area is books. I'll make that a brief one there, because that's more of a heroic task for most of us, because I mean that's not what we usually do, at least in our area, but in some cases we do. Two or three things I'd like to outline there. The publisher is key. The publisher is key. If you write a book for a publisher that is not good in the practitioner market, that won't work. The two books that you see here, the early one and the most recent one, Karriereachterbahn, published by the same publisher but under a different leadership of the publisher. The first book was marketed very, very well. And we got a lot of resonance. The publisher changed direction, so when we in the end decided to publish that again, the second book with the publisher, we didn't get very much resonance. The reason why we did that, we knew that in advance, is because the original publisher kind of turned down our manuscript, although we already had a kind of contract. Whether for good reasons or not is another debate. So books, I think, if you want to write a book that has resonance, kind of put most emphasis on the publisher. With good publishers, the proofreading will be gloriously painful, because good proofreaders will kind of really attack you. And if you are loving every word that you have written, you have to learn to distance yourself and say, yeah, it's just the word and not me that is kind of. And previous executive teaching helps a lot in this writing, because in all the cases, if you have one develop an extended thought about the whole thing, if you do it in exec teaching, you already know what works, what doesn't work, and what provides a story that helps. Yeah, in writing books, choose your colleagues as a writer also, because if you fall out with a colleague, which happened in one of these cases, then that can get very, very difficult. Articles written by others based on being interviews, these kind of very often they kind of I'm addressed about that. My kind of brief advice there is in a way to say, well, if it's your area of expertise, of course, but if it's not quite your area of expertise, usually one is amazed how much one knows, and sometimes one doesn't even realize that until somebody asks us. So my rule of thumb is say yes for such an interview request unless you really don't know about this issue. Be quick and response and reliable. If you're interviewed, especially if it's newspapers, it's a kind of very fast-paced business. So don't think about it 4 weeks. That doesn't work. Identify 3, 4, 5 core messages that you want to get across in an interview. That's also important. Think in advance if you know what they will be talking about, what you want to get across by all means, and try to kind of communicate that to the other one. When we are interviewed, sometimes we feel like back in school, being on the exam. No, this is an interview where people are really interested in your views, and it's not about right or wrong, but what you see. What's very important from my point of view is, especially if you're interviewed and maybe it's just one part of the article, they usually good newspapers, etc., interview a lot of people for an article. Coin or use imaginative words or phrases that are linked to your core messages, because they kind of grab the imagination and increase the chance that exactly this is cited, and that's one of your core messages. Also, don't disappointed. You talk to a journalist, for instance, for 30 or 40 minutes, and what it ends up with is 2 or 3 sentences. Yep, that's part of the story. It's 2 or 3 sentences, but it's 2 or 3 sentences read very widely, so that's good. And coming back to Amanda's question about the accurate picture, if you're asked to give clearance for a certain passage of text or a quotation, I have made it my rule, unless it's substantially wrong, I clear it. You see, if it gets the thing of, because we are used to fine nuances and could be, well, this is not how this type of business works. As long as it gets across the whole message, that's fine. Should we do it? Poor reasons are boredom, fame, or money, unless you're in the Capelli, Pfeffer, etc. Region. Then if you can charge, don't know, $80,000, $90,000 plus first-class flight, yeah, do it for the money. That's good, but most of us won't. Good reasons, I think, are there is, from my point of view, an obligation and a duty that we as academics have vis-a-vis society, and also different labels for that third mission, impact transfer for your university. For me, the major reason was self-development, because it puts you into a different game, and that's very, very important that we learn to play also different games, simplify our writing, and have different things. It can be a gateway drug because if you only write to practitioners, you lose some of your kind of academic expertise, but that's very far down the road anyway for most of us. But I thought I'd kind of mention that. Would I go down the same route again? Very active in this area, by all means. Thank you.
Thank you to Wolfgang and Kim, and especially thank you to Lisa, who again show her active participation in the Academy of Management and arranging a lot of very interesting PDWs and things like this. So thank you a lot, Lisa. So we'll briefly talk about my own experiences. I would not necessarily be normative, but I have a few hints and tips on the last slide. But mainly, I would talk about my motivation, my experience, how I think in my research communication. So it started really. I think I'm pretty lucky because more than half of my teaching is executive teaching. So it's executive MBA. It's something called Master of Management programs at our business school. And I learn a lot from the teaching in itself, but I also learned a lot about the lack of basic knowledge among managers and probably HR managers in particular, and a lot of faulty assumptions about both employees and managers, rooted in simplistic economic-based theories like agency theory and so on. And with particular relevance to HR managers, I mean, most of them are more interested in what's new rather than what works. They're more interested in what kind of systems you're using rather than what these systems can provide in terms of increasing employees' motivation, retention, performance, OCB, and so on. So there is a huge gap, I feel, where we as researchers can contribute in our research communication to practitioners, even if they're sometimes unwillingly listening to what you are saying. So my starting point is that my messages are not what most practitioners want to hear, but it's what they need to learn rather than what they want, because they typically want the simplicity. They listen to consultants and things like that. And I think we have a role to play in balancing that kind of communication. So based on this, I wrote my first scholarly book on HRM in 2008, which is not a textbook. It's used as a textbook in Norway. And my main motivation was that existing textbooks, especially back then, was so normative and little research-based. So I tried to use my experience with practicing managers and my passion for research to sort of try to combine that. And that book is now coming out in the 5th edition in a few months. So it's popular, and it's popular also among practitioners, which is a good thing. So my communication to practitioners is quite broad. It's books, it's podcasts, interviews with television, participating in debates on television, radio, and I also have a regular monthly column in the main business newspaper in Norway. And in terms of getting to communicate to the audience, you have to find channels where the audience is. And there is a study by Colbert et al. From 2005 looking at HR managers in particular from the US, and only 2% of them read academic journals. And my guess is that not much more are reading the so-called practitioners' journals, such as HBR, MIT Sloan Management Review, and so on. So if the ambition is to reach the audience, you need to use the channels where you find the audience. So that's why I don't spend a lot of time trying. I actually have never written a piece for these practitioner journals, but then I rather choose book chapters together with international colleagues and so on. So content-wise, topics. So first of all, I need to be interested in the topic. It needs to be hot to me, but it also needs to either to actually be interesting for practitioners, or I can make it to be interesting. So here are 3 of my latest monthly columns in the business newspaper. So one is about presentism bonuses, which really didn't work according to a very nice field experiment conducted by economists. Those in the incentive group actually increased their sickness leave by 53% over a year. And we have high sick leave numbers in Norway, so this is something that is on the agenda all the time. Another article was about remote working condition, remote work and performance. And this is also a big issue after the pandemic, and a lot of companies are having their back to office policies, and then it's highly relevant for practitioners. And then again, I think it's the 5th article in the same newspaper I have about these generational differences, which is pretty much bullshit. So I recently had one now about Generation Z. It's interesting that the same prejudice about Generation Z is pretty much the same as for the millennial generation. And it also, in order to be interesting to me, it needs to be a topic where practitioners typically have faulty beliefs and assumptions. So typically believing in these generational differences, believing in incentives in order for people to show up, or that enforcing people to come back to the office is an effective way of getting a productive work environment, which is of course wrong. And there needs to be solid empirical documentation and plausible explanations for the main findings. And of course, so the meta-analysis, recent meta-analysis on remote work, where the association between the degree of remote work and performance is explained by perceived autonomy. So I don't mention self-determination theory or the job characteristic model, because practitioner doesn't care the name of the theory. So, but I still think it is important to provide an explanation for the findings if practitioners are going to learn anything. And I also, when I choose a topic, it needs to have a practical implications, solutions somehow, typically like do more of this, less of that. I need to have a short paragraph on where to start to work in order to work more efficiently on these topics. So both Kim and Wolfgang talked about this, and my way, I don't know how conscious I have been about this, but this is more like in hindsight. But of course, I write in a simpler manner, but not simplistic language. So, and what does this mean? First of all, you have the opportunity to be more pointed, to sharply worded, and more provocative than I am when I write academic articles. But I think it is very important to be academically solid. So what does that mean? That means that I should be aware of the samples from the studies that I refer to. If I write about 1 or 3 experiments in an article, I need to discuss why I think this might be generalizable to practitioner population. I am pretty aware of research design causality issues. So when we write an article, we write, if we don't have an experiment, have experimental data, we say that there's a positive or negative association between X and Y. But I try to use language that is sort of more accessible, such as the more autonomy, the better performance, which is not a violation to the causality norm, but it's sort of more easily understood. So there's a recent article on ways that academics can take part in communicating to practitioners. And I, as Wolfgang, I would say that I'm more an impact-driven scholar rather than a pracademic, which is sort of more like 50-50. And of course, I do understand the needs of journalists, editors, and the audience. But if I'm going to have a profile, if I'm going to have impact, I need to be different from other experts like consultants, or, I mean, with social media, everyone is an expert today. So I think the academic part is sort of where I'm positioning myself. So my contribution is that I know research and I know how to communicate research. It's not that I'm first and foremost a practitioner. And of course, I need to have necessary expertise about what I'm writing, but unfortunately, I don't have 12 A+ journal publication each year, so I have to use other people's research. But I mean, reading a meta-analysis, reading a narrative review, you can become and with a lot of experience in doing research, being an editor in journals and so on, it doesn't take that much time to familiarize yourself with a relatively new topic. I have to say, for me, less is more. So I often say no to journalists, podcasters, and so on, especially when they want me to comment on surveys done by consultancy organizations that are psychometrically totally out of anything. So simple items, 2 out of 3 managers think this and that. And I say no to that kind of, because I don't want to legitimize sort of what sells out there. So I often say no, and I also say no because sometimes I mean, Norway is a small country, and it's relatively easy to become famous in Norway because we're only 5.5 million people, and people can get tired of me if I have a say about anything. So I try to narrow my communication to things that I really want to communicate and where I really have a high level of expertise. So in short, I do engage in, and I like and enjoy communicating with practitioners, but I'm also conscious about my academic integrity and how I'm perceived as an academic in the audience. So the final slide, I try to speed up here so we have time for the general discussion. So of course, this takes time, but it's a really great learning experience. And first of all, as I mentioned, I'm using this type of communication, particularly the monthly column in the business newspaper, in a way of developing expertise on new topics. Then I typically also make a slide or two for my teaching if I find a topic that is hot among practitioners and a topic that is interesting. So there is always a combination between my research, my teaching, and my communication with practitioners. Secondly, I think that writing for practitioners has made me a better communicator, not only in terms of the practitioner section, the implication for practice in academic journals, but also in writing academic journals in general. So shorter sentences, being more explicit, being more clear. So I think in general that having this dual type of writing is sort of good for both sides. So I think there is, at least for me, there is some kind of a synergy between writing purely academic and for practitioners. I'm a very socially conscious person, and I'm a news junkie. I follow debates about what's going on in society, also outside of my research, and I become irritated and angry when I heard practitioners are talking bullshit on television debates or in newspaper. So I find it's better to write and talk than to stay irritated and frustrated over managers' lack of logical thinking and ignorance. So I use it as a self-therapy. So what is my motivation? And basically, this is what I want to do. I am spending time on this. Of course, I do learn, as I just said, but I do it mainly because I want to. It's not a felt obligation toward the practitioner community. It's not about making my employer happy, even though they're happy that I'm a active contributor to research communication. It's not about rewards and it's not about status. I know some people worry about if I may lose my academic status if I'm participating too much in research communication toward practitioners. I think that is the case only if you oversell and if you simplify too much and if you sort of lose your academic integrity in that journey. So I don't think it needs to be a problem. And finally, as we know, intrinsic motivation has instrumental consequences. So I have received research communication prizes at my business school that came with great research money that I can spend for research, and I'm almost too well paid to have invited talks for practitioners. And the reason I'm too well paid is that I don't want to get less paid than retired athletes that are talking about how they was motivated to bicycling or skiing or whatsoever, or other celebrities in Norway, because I have something to offer and I don't want to sell my offerings at a cheaper price than people that has less to contribute with.